and welcome to the show. I'm V. LaBianca.
I'm Eric Murphy.
This is Skeptic Generation,
and we need to talk. Hey!
Hi.
How's it going?
I am feeling it this week.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I know we were off of our meds last week.
Mm-hmm.
I just picked mine up yesterday afternoon, so it's going to be a little bit, but I am doing my absolute best. You made us wonderful little espresso drinks this morning, and I am feeling it.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It's a weird Sunday to be doing a show. So I did want to address it real quick because it would be weird to not, considering it's 9/11. So the 9/11 attacks are old enough to drink now. And I wanted to talk about religious extremism for 2 seconds. Bear with me. I know we're all on the same page about it. But it really does hurt people. It kills. It has a body count. The 9/11 attacks, almost 3,000 people died. In the last 8 days, per the CDC, over 3,000 people died of COVID. And if we're going to talk about religious extremism and the body counts that they rack up, yeah, it's not as big and explosive as a terror attack, but the religious extremism that opposed the education of people for COVID and the vaccinations that rolled out is actively growing a body count that is bigger every 8 days.
By orders of magnitude.
Every 8 days. There's 8 days of normal life in the U.S. right now. So, yeah. Just thought I'd throw that out there for a little bit of fun early morning.
Religiously motivated partisan apathy.
I like it. See, you're on top of it. You're more on top of it than I am today. If you have questions, comments, actually not, don't call them with comments, just questions, please, about religious extremism and about really anything, what you believe, why you believe it, give us a call at 585-526-8774, or you can use the link tiny.cc/callSG. Mm-hmm. We already have a couple of calls in the line, which is awesome.
Yeah. Who do we want to talk to first?
Let's talk about anti-natalism and consent with Ian from North Carolina. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. What is your question today?
Okay, so I've been following your anti-natalism thread over the past few episodes. And so I have one quick question before I plow in forward with this, because if your answer is yes, then basically shoots my whole concept out of the water.
All right.
Are either of you nihilists?
I'm a form of nihilist. Okay.
I wouldn't call myself a nihilist, but I don't really have a term for my worldview in that kind of arena. So it's possible I am, and I just haven't been made aware of it yet.
Okay, well, maybe I'm mislabeling that in reference to this argument or concept. Anyway, so the big argument from V's perspective, at least as I understood it, was based off consent. Mm-hmm. Under the idea that you can't give consent to existence. And I agree wholeheartedly that you cannot give consent, and that consent is a vital part of our interaction with other sentient individuals. Mm-hmm. However, I would say that I think I've heard an argument from either both of you or one of you that existence is preferable to non-existence. And so like no matter how much struggles and strife we go through, we still have the beauty of the morning. We have the beauty of the relationships that we have with other people and those wonderful things.
I'm not going to deny that as a concept necessarily, but I don't remember ever saying that on the show.
No, I've heard that said in other shows.
Right. It's definitely a line that is used, but I don't think that I would necessarily agree in all cases just because of my view on antinatalism.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that was where I was looking at it as, like, not saying that, like, any existence is better than no existence, but it coming from the viewpoint of if you enter into the idea of a natalistic relationship with someone by creating their existence, if you enter into that with forethought, respect, and intent, then it's kind of like the ultimate act of generosity in that you are there giving something to this person that they could not consent to. They couldn't ask it of you. That's something that can be.
I can see your point there. My concern with that is less of a practical one because people are going to keep having kids regardless, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And if you are going to have kids, viewing it in the way that you've just described, Ian, is a good way to view it. Do it with respect, do it with forethought, do it with intention. Cool. I agree with you. But I also think that the way that we view, like, we need to be careful with that argument that, like, I know what's best for you, and therefore I am giving you a gift, even if you cannot consent to it. That can get us into a realm of allowing for other things that, like, get us into really mucky waters. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think it may be the only action that might be able to even be begun to be thought of in those terms.
And I think a good way forward, because I think this is a good entry point if we wanted to dive into, like, the philosophical end of this, a good way forward would be to create a category wherein this is the only acceptable time to do that. Like, that would refute my argument. If you could convince me that bringing someone into existence without their consent is somehow apart from other things that you do to people without their consent, then yes, we could probably come to that agreement. But we would need that category kind of set up first.
Right. Okay. Well, we just set it up, but so I don't know how we would go about. Go ahead, Derek. Sorry.
No worries. I honestly think that the whole idea of existence being preferable to non-existence is kind of like multiplying by zero. When you're talking about non-existence, that's so broad and so general that I think you can't really add to non-existence that way or compare against non-existence that way. It's only when a thing exists can we then judge, or even make comparisons or just, personal kind of judgments over whether one thing would be preferable or over another. But I think it's kind of flawed if you were to put non-existence on a scale like that. Do you get what I mean?
Right, like the concept of before time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the existence being preferable to non-existence, you could give me pro-natalist arguments, you can give me anti-natalist arguments, but anybody who kind of engages on that specific reasoning, I'm kind of out of that fight because I don't see that as useful or beneficial to anybody. I just see that as pretending that non-existence can be kind
like
repercussions.
It's tricky with this topic because there's the everyday kind of platitude-based way that we talk about existing, right? If I were with somebody who was struggling, I would say to them that existence is preferable to non-existence in only that you are still alive to experience existence versus not. However, when it comes to philosophical arguments, it's a completely different ballgame. And so then we get into the argument around like, well, what is the weight of non-existence, and can you weigh anything against it? And can you even not exist? Because there is no you at all. So it's not like you didn't exist and now you do. It's just you exist. And at some point, you won't anymore. Like, there's no you experiencing non-existence. So philosophically, it does get dicey, but on a practical, like, talking to another human, level, yeah, I agree. But, like, there are two different conversations happening.
Does it really matter?
Well, so here's kind of, like, if I may take that in this direction, I could phrase that continued existence is generally preferable to revocation of existence. Right?
I like that.
And so, yeah, you know, for me to revoke your existence, I think that it's preferable that I not do that. But here's kind of where I think that matters, because implicit in a natalist argument with that reasoning is the idea that somehow children exist before they're conceived. And I think that...
Right. I did catch that as an argument, or not an argument, that might be grasped at off of what I had said, and I should have prefaced with that as well, that I didn't think that was the right way to go.
Well, but I mean, that's true for you, but I think that is important to bring up, especially on a show where people are watching, that, you know, the idea is that there are a lot of people whose epistemic justifications include this implicit idea that, you know, there are pre-birth existing entities, souls waiting for a body to enter the planet. And when you have that kind of reasoning, if you're able to dive in to this degree and go, okay, let's talk about existence, non-existence, or revocation of existence, then you can, I hope, better underscore where the problem is, you know, where there's that disconnect.
Right.
Okay.
That's a really good point.
I can see that. Yeah, meaning, like, if I was to end up in that discussion, the idea of that's something to be looking out for in the response from the other side would be, this entity is waiting to be born, whereas it's, more, that's not... And to try and say, so you're fighting against that. Well, or not fighting against it, but just claiming that it's not a thing.
Right. And even more insidiously, though, I think a lot of people who are raised in a religious environment carry that implicit understanding of things without putting it into those words.
Oh, it's not even just a religious environment. I think that that's just a thing that we haven't quite wrapped our heads around as humans, that, like, people don't exist, and then they exist, and then they don't again. Like, the whole concept of an afterlife arose by itself multiple times across the world because we had difficulty dealing with that concept. So I think a big part of this, even if you're not actively saying there are souls floating out there that need a body, there is still this concept of, but, like, there could be someone here, and there isn't, and that somebody must want to be here. Like, it's really tricky to get the emotional piece out of the way.
Yeah. That reminds me of a time I got really, really high on salvia. That was my whole experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't there, but you really wanted to be?
No. Everything that was there because it wanted to be.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm getting way off topic here.
Ian, I think we agree more than we disagree on this one. I
think so too. I felt you very firmly on all of your points before. It was just a concept that came to me when I was mulling over the third time watching through.
Well, thank you for those 3 views.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if we have said in the past that existence is better than non-existence without any clarifiers, then yeah, that is absolutely a friction point there. I don't remember saying that, even though on a practical level, I like what Eric says about the continuation of existence being the thing that we're talking about. But yeah, absolutely. Thanks for calling our attention to that.
Yeah, hopefully it helps people
Right,
watch
and
them.
I may be mistaken in conflating other experiences as well.
Oh, it happens. It happens.
Honestly, Ian, there are so many shows where people just kind of regurgitate stuff that they've heard before. It took me a really long time to develop my own opinions, so it's totally understandable.
All right. Thanks, Ian.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
I think there's
Yeah.
also there. I did want to touch on this. I think that there is a fundamental fallacy in terms of how we talk about things like reproductive rights and anti-natalism and everything around the concept of people that exist currently and people that do not exist currently, right? However that even makes sense. And it's the idea that everyone deserves the same consideration. Like if there is an answer, it's an answer for everybody, right? So like existence is preferable to non-existence. Well, that must be applicable to everybody, including people that don't exist yet. It's like, well, no. Like there are some things that just apply to people that currently exist. And then there are things that, like we have to be willing to accept that there is nuance and there are different answers based on where you are in your life or lack thereof. Like it's really tricky to me to have to parse like absolute answers to these questions that apply to everybody, whether they exist or not.
Well, so can I be just deliciously pedantic for just a second before we move on to the next call? If we were to make a statement that says that something applies to everyone, I think it could be true because they don't become part of everyone until they exist.
Well, yeah, if we granted that, but a lot of people won't.
Yeah, fair.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
I fully agree with that, and that's the only way that my argument against natalism works, which is everyone requires autonomy, including people who don't exist.
And at that point, then it falls apart, given the talk we just had. You know what? It takes a lot to be able to stand up and go, hey, here's a problem in my logic that I'm working through. I wish more people did that.
Yeah.
I'm glad we get to model that on the show because, hey, we're just some assholes on the internet. But better to figure out where you need to work on things than any other way. So, yeah. All right. Who are we talking to next?
Let's talk to Allie, I believe it's pronounced, in Washington. Allie, is that how you pronounce your name?
It's actually Ale, but any way you pronounce it is fine.
Ale, that's perfect.
I have that. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Welcome to the show. You wanted to talk about an argument for bodily autonomy. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit of my background to say where I'm coming from. I was raised Catholic, but I have been an atheist now for like several years.
Okay.
And but even back when I was a Catholic, I was pro-choice. And the way I would always argue on pro of this was to say, from the perspective of reduction of suffering. So I would be like, a fetus is not still a person, and as long as they haven't developed the ability to feel suffer, then it is better to avoid the suffering of them coming to a world that the parents are not prepared to take care of them, and they're going to go to the system, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, it plays a little bit with the anti-natalism that you were discussing a moment back. But it wasn't until I became an atheist and I started watching like all these answer and coming shows. And by the way, I have become a big fan of you two guys.
Yay!
I discovered you like 2 or 3 months ago, and I binge watch all your previous seasons.
Good.
Oh, glad you like it.
And yeah, no, I love you two. You are great together. And I love the cat. Yeah, I see him in the anyway, I hadn't heard the argument of bodily autonomy before this. Mm-hmm. And honestly, when I heard it, it clicked on me, and I was like, "This makes so much sense."
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had a little bit of a conflict with because pursuing bodily autonomy by itself makes sense to me. It is intuitive correctly to me, but I haven't found a way to argue about for complete bodily autonomy from the perspective of reducing harm or reducing suffering in a society. Because one part of me is like, okay, I understand why giving out a kidney or being pregnant is a huge health risk for the person giving the kidney. So allowing them to choosing that makes sense because it's a big risk for them. But on the other hand, saying, "Oh, you have to give blood," provide blood because you're the only donor,
right? Or get a vaccine for a disease, right? Yeah.
Or wear a mask in the grocery store. All those activities are really not high risk for the person doing the action and contribute a high amount to the reduction of suffering.
Yeah, moral calculus is rough. So, it's a whole thing. If I can jump in here, because I think I see the conflict. You've done a really good job of kind of explaining there are two parts to this argument. There's the harm reduction piece, and then there's the bodily autonomy piece. And how do you juggle those two in a way that actually meets the requirements of both? Because a lot of the time, what is best for an individual might not be best for a group. And at that point, are you sacrificing, reduction of harm for bodily autonomy or vice versa? And
of course.
Yeah, this is a big question. And the way that I've been approaching it is I've been putting for myself bodily autonomy on top, or as that base, which I guess would be the bottom. And then everything else comes from that. I would not, for example, advocate if we found out that there were people accosting people in the street and force vaccinating them against COVID. I'd be like, that's kind of fucked up. I do not endorse that. That is not good. I mean, it's a funny thing to think about, but it's not.
It's something that the founding fathers were fully behind as well. Force vaccinating the populace.
Well, yeah. So if we want to go down that route,
sorry, I go ahead.
But my point here is that I am fairly consistent in that bodily autonomy is always first, and then after you have secured your own bodily autonomy and made sure you aren't imposing it on someone else, then you get to talk about harm reduction. Then you get to talk about, okay, well, now we get to do this calculus now that I know that this one thing is pretty set, right? And there's always going to be a level of moving into other people's autonomy. Like people are watching this. When I first started this episode, I talked about 9/11 for a minute. That might not have been something everyone was ready to hear. And so in that way, yeah, I kind of took a little bit of that autonomy away because they did not consent to hearing about 9/11. And if that's you, I apologize. But also...
Yeah,
There's never going to be an absolute perfect moral stance that meets all the requirements. There is no one perfect answer. There is no one person who can do it all perfectly. What you have to decide for yourself is which one is more important to you, harm reduction or bodily autonomy, because they are at odds a lot of the time. And how do you put those both into the equation every time you have to conceive of a moral problem that you need to solve? And be honest that it's tricky. That's totally fine. People try and use it as a gotcha. Oh yeah, you're against abortion. Well, what about vaccines? It becomes this gotcha. And the answer to that is, yeah, isn't moral calculus hard? That's tricky. But my moral compass says that bodily autonomy is most important. So even though I think that everyone should be educated and given access to vaccines, I'm not going to advocate that they get mugged in the street in order to get vaccinated. And the same goes for being carrying a child or a fetus or what have you, So, yeah, it is tricky, and it can be, and that's fine.
I
Yeah, no,
don't know.
Let's let Ale finish up first.
I was going to push a little bit is like bodily autonomy being over harm reduction. And I guess that it is true that, like, you cannot do black and white here, like, where you say, like, oh, you're going to go for bodily autonomy first and then harm reduction second every single time. I agree that it is something that you have to consider, like, on a case-on-case basis.
Exactly.
I guess that, and honestly, I think that in some topics, like pregnancy, it's a really easy choice for me to make. And I guess that other people would be against that. But, for example, you cannot say, like, oh, I guess that the way I define bodily autonomy is I am free to do with my body anything as long as I am not actively harming another person by my choices. And you could see it like, oh, I am allowed to move around and move in any public space as long as I am not punching someone in the face or something like that.
Right.
But then you go to the tricky part of like, oh, I am allowed to go to a public place and not wear a mask and then cough in a person's face. I would consider that as a high harm as well. So I would say, like, in that case, then reduction of harm takes precedence against bodily autonomy.
Well, yes, but you also have to think about it from the other side of things. So, because the person who is, there are always two people in these conversations. So let's say you and somebody else want to go to a place, and you both have the bodily autonomy to be able to go to that place, and you should. But one person is not wearing a mask, which is their bodily autonomy coming into play. That removes the autonomy from the other person to go to that space. So they are actively harming somebody in that way. So it really does then become this very, like, these equations that have to be run constantly, which is exhausting. And honestly, a lot of it is solved if you just have freaking empathy for people. But it really does become this either or situation a lot of the time, which is, again, why it's so tricky. Like, it's not an accident or like a weird fluke that this mask thing or the vaccine thing is so tenuous right now and so muddy, because it does, it is happening at that intersection of those two moral standpoints, both of which are, at least on its face, valued in society. So, like, you want to believe you don't cause people harm, and you want to believe that you respect autonomy, and you want no harm to come to you, and you want others to respect your autonomy. So now what do you do? And it is tricky.
See, I chalk it up to childishness, to be honest. It is incredibly myopic. And for people who don't know what myopic means, it means short-sighted. It means unable to see what is directly in front of you. That people think that they should only be judged on their intent and not their impact. And if you are really looking at things like bodily autonomy, if you're looking at harm reduction, if you're looking at, how you are impacting the world around you, you do need to take that into account. It doesn't matter how high and mighty your intent is, own your fucking impact. And that also goes towards how we should look at autonomy itself. I personally, yes, I think autonomy should be respected. It is not necessarily always, like, absolute autonomy is not always the goal. Example, I give up bodily autonomy when I participate in a social contract. Do I agree with all of the things in that social contract? No, I don't. But I'm still involved in a society where if I do certain things, I will get arrested. There are benefits to the social contract and there are downsides to the social contract. But recognizing that and understanding that you are interacting on so many different levels that, giving up some freedoms can give you some benefits. And it, like V said, you're constantly weighing that out. And I absolutely see that. I just think that, you know, for someone to say, oh, I have the freedom to, I love the mask example, to be honest. I was trying to think of another one, but that is just really, really good.
It is a really poignant.
I should have the freedom to, you know, make a place potentially unsafe for everyone else around me. Is begging to be judged on your intent instead of taking responsibility for your impact. And I think that you have a lot of people that refuse to take responsibility for themselves, and that's where the problem is.
Oh yeah, it is. And that's the other side of this equation, is how people will see you. Like, if you want to go to a coffee shop and not be masked, like, okay, you have made that moral judgment for yourself. Everyone else is going to make a judgment about you based on that. And that is not something you can be upset about, right? Like, you need to be able to own that, in the same way that, like, and I don't have a second example.
No worries.
Ale, does that sound kind of like...
That answers my question in a really big way, because this is what I have been like juggling in my mind, and I was guessing that the answer was going to be like, yeah, bodily autonomy is by itself axiom to be pursued, and yeah, in every situation you will have to like weigh both things in and make a decision about it. It is kind of scary, because I feel like the same conversation can be flipped, be said on, oh, gotcha then. You believe that everybody should get the vaccine, but you believe that women should have a choice, despite like the harm that we can do to a baby or something like that. So I kind of feel like then it becomes like a more, it allows for more subjective opinion, more than objective, which is a scary place to be. But
yeah, there is.
I guess that
yeah,
things are as we are.
There's no silver bullet. I think bodily autonomy is a very good, in fact, the best I've found argument for pro-choice stuff. But like, that's the thing. It is pro-choice, and it's pro-educated choice and pro-access, right? So like, actually, I am very consistent in that I think that everyone should be educated on their medical issues and be informed and have access and have it be paid for, so they don't need to worry about that. And once we have all of that education about vaccines, about pregnancy, once we have all of that access, I guarantee you a lot of these will be solved. And a lot of this problem is actually coming from this place of lack of education or miseducation and scarcity. So we're having these conversations and they actually do intersect, but it's not on the bodily autonomy or harm reduction point. It's on the, hey, this is an access issue. This is a safety issue. This is a funding issue and an education issue. And on that, I am solid, right? Like we are 100% on the same page there, regardless of what we're talking about. And yeah, if you choose not to get the vaccine because you know your body, like, all right, I'm probably not going to hang out with you because I don't want to kill you by accident, but like, I'm not going to drag you or like report you to the government so that you can get sued for that.
No, nobody is taking people that don't wear masks to jail.
Right,
currently.
Exactly. Right. So except there are people in Alabama right now, I believe it's Alabama or Arizona, one of the A states, who is jailing pregnant women just because they want to make sure that they don't get an abortion at some point. So we're just going to put you in jail for no reason for like months. Yeah,
that's American Taliban shit.
That's extremism if you want to talk about it. Anyway, Ale, we need to move on to another call, but like, great topic, great conversation.
Thank you so much for your time.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for both of your time, and have a wonderful day.
You too.
You too.
Bye. We can't give a silver bullet, but we can at least engage honestly with the topic. And if someone else is not willing to do that, if they are just using this as a gotcha to score points, that's not a conversation partner you need to worry about. Like, that's not, they aren't interested in actually having a good conversation about our moral dilemmas. They're interested in winning, which is why I don't debate.
I do, but that's a different discussion because I see value in it. By the way, before we move on to the next call, I just
Yeah.
want to let you know that I have my legs crossed and I'm sitting on my feet, and I have a cat now on my lap,
Yeah.
which means that I can't feel my feet. So it's going to be weird after the show.
It's going to collapse.
Yep, but we're going to do our best.
And she is just so happy right now.
Oh, yeah, she's good.
She likes the camera.
All right.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Let's talk to Sajid in
I-
Canada.
I would really, really like that.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
We are good. Welcome to the show. You want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about Islam and social justice? I'm very, very interested to hear this
Yes.
conversation.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so you want me to go ahead then?
Absolutely. Go for it. Give us a nutshell kind of conversation starter so we can dive in.
Right, yeah. So today's 9/11, obviously. It's a very sad day for me, unfortunately. I know a lot of times Islam is portrayed as violent and focuses on terrorism and extremism, and I have a very different view of what Islam is and how to interpret it, I guess.
Do you consider yourself Muslim?
Yes.
Okay. So, how does it make you feel when you see groups like Boko Haram take the holy book that you study and use use that to justify their violent acts? Like, how do you internalize that? What do you think of that?
Honestly, it makes me want to cry. It makes
you-
me very sad.
Do you think they're wrong?
I believe they're wrong. In my interpretation, I believe they're wrong, yes.
Okay. I would love to know what that interpretation is and how that differs from their interpretation, because I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to a lot of Islam, and I would love to know what it is that would motivate someone to shoot up a bus full of, young girls and say that, the Quran promoted it, and then for you to look at something like that and it would make you cry. What's going on there, do you think?
Well, I think there are several verses that are interpreted wrong, or they're not interpreted contextually, and people take them to interpret that they still need to be carried out today. Like there's certain verses that talk about, kill the heathen or whatever, but I believe they had to make sense of the culture and the time the Quran was revealed. If that makes any sense.
I mean, it does, in that it kind of explains where your head is. So the idea of you're interpreting it wrong is definitely something that I'm much more familiar with. The idea that, well, I've got the right of it and this person has the wrong of it. Let me ask you, if do you think that the God that you believe in could give you a book that doesn't get misinterpreted? Could a God give a more clearly, concisely written book? Or do you think we're kind of stuck with that?
I mean, it says in Surah 3:7, I believe, that there's some ambiguity to the Quran. There's verses that are ambiguous and others that are not. So I believe it is really up to us to interpret it. And unfortunately, I believe several groups have taken it the wrong way.
Well, it sounds like they took it the right way, just not the way that you agree with. I mean, if it's up to them to interpret it and they interpreted it their way, then that does sound sanctioned. Like, that does sound legitimized, at least from where I'm sitting. Again, I'm asking questions here. So.
That way, yeah.
Say
I
again?
suppose you could see it. Oh, I suppose you could see it that way. I don't know. I'm pretty new to Islam, so I'm still kind of working these things out, and this is why I like to have conversations with people who don't agree with me, and
Yeah.
So how do we pronounce your name? Is it Saeed?
Sajid.
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 So Sajid, I gotta tell you, man, like the amount of people who are able to sit in this because man, not knowing is so uncomfortable. It is such a gut, pit in your feeling place to be. The fact that you can sit there and be in that place and then talk about it means a lot for where you can grow and what you can do. Because on our side of it, I think that your morality is better than your holy book. That you, Sajid, are actually better than it. But I know that's not where you're at. But I appreciate that you would kind of be in this place for it. That's really cool.
Do you know much about Sufis?
I probably did at one point, but I would be talking out of my butt in the first 5 minutes. If you were to ask me to explain things, could you enlighten us? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, the Sufis are they're the mystic sort of interpretation of Islam. They believe there's a deeper interpretation than what the surface text says. They tend to focus more on less on doing the strict religious practices and more focusing on mystical or experiences and the love of God and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm more interested in.
Sufi poetry is some of the most jaw-droppingly beautiful artwork I have ever encountered. So I fully understand why you would gravitate towards that. That is for anyone who has not read Rumi or Hafiz, go do that because you deserve it. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about secular governance?
Secular governance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I believe it's very important.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. So do you think that that your holy book would advocate for secular governance?
Yes, there's a verse that says there's no compulsion in religion in Surah 2, I believe it's verse 256, and that's been interpreted to mean that people are allowed to freely practice their religion and you shouldn't be forced.
Interesting. So here's what I would really like. I would really, really like for when this clip comes out for people to share it with us, other Muslims, because the conversation that can be had in the comments can be one that is much more, well-rounded than one that's going to be had with me. And I really hope that happens because I've got to tell you, I'm just not at a place where I can, quote verses. I can do that with the Bible, but I can't do that with your holy book. And I feel like that leaves me poorly prepared, so I can only speak in generalities.
Yeah, and I can only quote pieces of mystic poetry, which isn't directly from the Quran either. So I think honestly, Sajid, what I want to take away from this and what I think is really important is that when we're talking about things like bodily autonomy and harm reduction, which is the last call we had, it's kind of the core of my moral structure. If you have adopted a worldview or a religion or a belief system and have decided to help rehabilitate it or fight the extremist factions of it, then that is a worthy goal, frankly.
Sure.
And the fact that you are willing to jump on a call online and be like, hey, I disavow that, here's how I interpret things, that's a big step.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to, thank you for. We can talk about whether or not your God is real or whether or not your beliefs are founded in the laws of logic, right? We could go down that route, but I don't think that's the place for this today. If you would like to call back and have that conversation, we can.
Oh, we would love to navel gaze with you, Sajid.
But the point that I want to make before we let you go is we have no quarrel on a moral level right now. As far as I know, you are looking at the same things that I look at and saying, that's bad. What can we do to fix that? And how can I take responsibility in providing a different perspective. And we can dive more into that perspective hopefully next time. But yeah, I think you're doing a good job so far.
Thank you for calling too. This was nice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And God bless you. I know you don't believe in God, but God bless you anyway.
Sajid, we understand the sentiment that you mean by that.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. Peace.
I'm honestly, I bet you anything that if you watch just like a compilation, we should make one of like just my perspective over time in the years that I've been doing this, the years and years, the shift from, but it's not logical, to who are you harming and how are you advocating for justice, is like the shift has just gone in that direction. And
Yeah.
I'm so ready and willing to have those philosophical, theological debates.
I love the but it's not logical arguments.
I do too, but I think that if we try and focus on that every time, A, it gets stale. It does get
Speak
boring.
for yourself.
And B, it does put the humanity of the person on the other side, especially if they are calling in to find common ground or to advocate for a better way of living, on trial, essentially.
Agreed.
So do with that what you will.
Yeah.
And definitely do check out the Sufi mystic poets. Out beyond the fields of right and wrong, there is a place. I will meet you there. Like, when I read that for the first time, I don't even know if I'd said that correctly. Like, I cried. I was on a hill in college, just like doing homework, reading some poetry, and I just went, just a waterworks.
I could see that.
So good.
I could see that.
Good. All right.
I know exactly what kind of kid you were in college.
Oh,
yeah.
I walked under the moon and read Rumi in my car when it was raining. I got out of my bed in my dorm. I was like, it's raining. I'm going to go sit in my car so I can hear the rain more and read this poetry. I was that kid.
I got you.
Insufferable.
No, because I guarantee you that if you're watching this, you probably were some version of that kid as well. You're welcome. You are welcome here. You are home. This is your community. We're glad you made it.
Who would you like to talk to? Because we do have quite a few people on the line.
We do. So before we talk to another religious person, I saw that we have someone in Scotland who I just personally, one of the reasons is I want to talk to someone in Scotland because the Queen just died. But also the question, should we be tolerant of people with outlandish worldviews like flat earthers? And I think that's a really good conversation to have.
Yeah, let's do it.
I didn't put them in the lower third, though. I still got to type that up. But Chris in Scotland, you're live with Eric and V.
Hello?
Hi again.
Hello, Chris. Welcome back.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thank you.
This is mine. What can we answer for you today? You're asking about being tolerant of people with views that are pretty out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people in my life, and I've met people who have views which I would call pretty crazy or outlandish, and in some cases even to the point where they're dangerous and thought-stopping, and, for example, not believing in evolution and, thinking the Earth is flat. And I'm just curious, even if these beliefs are in some cases dangerous, should we be tolerant of them, the beliefs or the people, and to what extent?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last bit right there. You can be tolerant of people and not tolerant of certain beliefs of theirs, right? So the only way this is a problem is if that person has made their belief their whole identity, and in that case, that's a cult, and you cannot really help them as an outlier. Like, it's been proven that the more you try and grab someone out of a cult, the worse they cling on to it. Like, it's actually quite difficult to do. If they have made it their whole identity, maybe that's something that you depending on who you are and your level of involvement with them, you should back away from. But most people have really outlandish ideas, like all of us, all the time. And I guarantee you're watching, you're thinking, not me. Yes, you too. Maybe you haven't thought about it in a while, but absolutely, we all have freaking stupid ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
Every
that,
time I open my mouth during an episode, I wind up letting one of them out.
I think that the key here is you can be tolerant of people and not exclude them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to accept their ideas wholeheartedly without pushback. So there is a difference between being in community with somebody and endorsing everything that they say, right? And I think that that's something that we have to understand as a whole a lot better, is like, I have people in my communities, the various communities that I identify with, who I fundamentally disagree with about things. And those two things can live together as long as you are holding them to a standard and encouraging them to think differently or consider other ideas. Like, my family, I love them to death. I'm the only atheist. I'm the only leftist. I'm like, there are so many things of which I am the only one. And we accept each other. And they're tolerant of me and I'm tolerant of them. But we will constantly push each other in conversation. Well, what about this? Okay, well, what about that? And I like to think that we're both making progress in that area. You can be tolerant of somebody and also challenge them, is what I'm saying here. The options are not challenge them and then kick them out, or, accept them and never say a bad thing about anything they believe.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm so curious where you disagree on this one.
Well, so
this is becoming more and more the show where Eric and V disagree about things.
It is
kind of awesome.
Yeah, it kind of is. I enjoy it. So I guess the first thing I want to put down is it takes all approaches. Somebody may not really think about the outlandish worldview they have until they get made fun of for it. And so I'm never going to advocate against making fun of those people. But I'm also never going to advocate for never finding community. So I agree with you in that part. I don't know. I think that if you have gone so far down the rabbit hole that you think that the earth is flat, or you are just so poorly educated that you never understood evolution enough to understand that that is just what reality is, you don't have to soften the blow for them when that comes into conflict with the outside world. So I don't know. I think that, respect people you want to have. Well, okay, first of all, respect all people. Ideas are not deserving of respect. That said, putting up with somebody's crazy bullshit, that's not respect. Mm-hmm. That is just placating them.
That's a really good point. I like that.
And so, like, I think that no one is entitled to spout off whatever crazy, potentially dangerous bullshit they want, and you're all of a sudden disrespectful because you called out their really fucking dangerous ideas. So I don't know. I take a pretty hard line on it that if somebody wants to engage in, community, if someone wants to have community with me, then we got to have a couple things in common, and if that's not the case, then you're not allowed in, And the idea, the thing that pisses me off, again, it goes back to the autonomy conversation we had earlier, is this lack of responsibility for your own impact, and I think that that's where it really comes into focus, especially with conspiracy theorists. Oh, well, I can just,
God.
right. Oh, hey, I'm just going to, spread all of these crazy ideas about an Illuminati and lizard people and, potentially fucking anti-Semitic shit, and everyone's just going to have to, deal with me. No, we're not going to deal with you. We're not going to say that's smart, and we're not going to say that's okay. And if somebody wants to break bread with you, fine, but I don't know. I find myself less and less tolerant, but maybe it's because I was too tolerant in the first place.
I mean, I find that over time I have less and less patience for dealing with people with, I say crazy, but perhaps that's uncharitable, people with bizarre worldviews. And it seems that when you find someone with a bizarre worldview, very often they don't just have one, they have many. So if you believe in religion, chances are you'll believe in conspiracy theories. Chances are you'll believe in, I don't know, the magic of crystals. I mean, I know that I was certainly like that. And, you know, I find myself less and less tolerant of it. And I just worry as a society that, you know, we're in the 21st century and yet people are just allowed to go off, you know, spouting superstitious nonsense with free abandon.
Can I
just really quickly, TP Seeker in the comments said, tolerating flurfers is how their BS is spreading and being pushed into denying science, which is reaching into public schools. Here in Texas, that is absolutely the case. I spoke at the State Board of Education when they were trying to remove a lot of important history from history books here in Texas for that reason. So I agree. But go ahead.
Well, I actually saw that as well. And I'm wondering what tolerating means in that instance. Tolerating does not mean giving them positions of authority.
Right, giving them a platform.
Right, or allowing them to teach classes. That's not what we're advocating for. What does tolerating mean? Does it mean locking them away? Like, that's thought crime. That's not good. Does it mean like shunning them so they all get together and form a freaking QAnon conspiracy cults? Like, because we tried that and that went badly. What does tolerating mean in that instance?
That's a good point. I think I was conflating tolerating with giving them a platform.
Right. So
that makes sense. The point you're making.
That's what I would say. And also, Chris, I did want to touch on something. You said you were in that space a while ago, and you're coming out of it.
I was.
And I'm wondering if you felt when you first called in, because I remember your first call with us and kind of how that started some gears turning, I think. Were we tolerant of you then? Like, was that us tolerating you? Like, how do you view your relationships with the people who have challenged you to grow and think differently in this context? Do you feel like you were given, tolerance, or do you feel like you were excluded and mocked into this? Like, how did you come out of it?
I mean, I feel like when I called in, you were perfectly polite, but by all means, you did challenge some of my worldviews, some of my misconceptions, and this is sort of how I've gotten from believing in everything from Atlantis and alien abductions and everything, and I slowly whittled away at the insanity, that I believed in, and that's partly due to people making fun of me rather than mocking me. Although I think there's a distinction without a difference. And challenging me, and I really am grateful for people doing that.
Yeah.
Making fun of you, I disagree with. Making fun of really bad ideas. Again, there's that whole conflation with self and ideas. So different. And one of them is very important. But we couldn't have made fun of those ideas with you if we were not tolerating your presence with us. And so I think they are connected. We must, if it is somebody who we think we can actually have that conversation with, right? This isn't opening yourself up to everybody or assuming everyone is going to be like you, Chris. But we must have these people in our communication circles if we are going to effectively make fun of their bad beliefs. And in order to do that, we must then tolerate their existence. And so I think that it's a both and. It's not an either or. Agreed. I would never advocate for not tolerating someone's existence. Yeah. The
last thing I will say here, and then I'll let you go, Chris, is I feel like you may be exactly where I was in 2018, 2019, where I had deconverted fairly recently. And it's something that a lot of people who are coming out of these bad beliefs that kind of ruined or wrecked bits of their lives experience, which is that kind of upset, angry phase. And that's not a bad thing by any means. It's necessary, it's healthy. You should feel all of those things. That said, the most important takeaway that I got from my time as a religious fundamentalist is being able to put myself in their shoes and understand where the majority of them were coming from. Being like, I was not a bad person or a stupid person when I was a religious fundamentalist. I was just misinformed, intentionally, like abusively misinformed and miseducated. Right. And I found my way out. And so this other person is spouting off the same exact nonsense that I was. I can be angry at them because I'm angry at past me for falling for it or for maybe hurting other people. Or I can take that and offer that in empathy and be like, I have been in this person's shoes. I understand the rhetoric that's in their brain that's making this reasonable. So I'm not saying not to make fun of things, but I am saying in order to move through the phase where you are mad at people and questioning whether or not we should tolerate them, it must, like, the way through that is empathy and remembering where you were when you were that person.
I don't know. I feel like that. I feel like that's creating a magic bullet approach. I totally understand it.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to work.
That's the best version of me that I would like to see in myself. But at the same time, I think that publicly, loudly shaming and absolutely decimating awful views needs to happen too.
Right, but there's a difference between like publicly shaming awful views that are espoused by people who are intentionally trying to be awful and have the following. Like, you can beat up on Ben Shapiro all you want. In fact, people don't do it enough. Like, please go beat up on Ben Shapiro some more. But like, so a non-egg 2027,000 having a bad opinion, mocking that person, you don't know anything about them.
No. I'm specifically talking about like how many people have been homophobic in churches and didn't have bad intent? A lot of them. Mm-hmm. A lot of them. Should I treat that homophobia with empathy? No, not all. I mean, if you want to, if you have that relationship, and I would encourage that if you have the spoons for it, go for it. But I do want to voice the other side of that, which is it is no one's obligation to have to do that. And if calling it out is where you're at, then I don't want you to think that there's no value there either, because there is.
Oh, there is no... I fully agree. And you can call someone out and still have empathy for them. This isn't a have empathy and don't say anything. It's more of a personal like approach, because I know I burnt the fuck out when I was an angry atheist. I was so mad all the time. I was just constantly in this state of aggression. And I'm still here. I'm still doing a show and beating up on Ben Shapiro on Twitter. But like, the approach for me was healing. I am no longer an angry person because I was able to say, okay, I'm going to address these issues through empathy instead of through aggression, unless it's Ben Shapiro again.
Well,
Fuck that guy. All right, we're getting off topic here.
I'm just thinking of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, garbage person.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Like this isn't
Chris
like
is like this is American politics. What do you guys?
Sorry, Chris. Yes. I hope we answered your question. I don't know if we actually got closer to an answer between ourselves, but that's par for the course.
Yeah. I think you did. And I do appreciate the chat. Before I go, I'd just like to say, Eric, about the Queen, you wanted to know something.
No, I just wanted to get your take on it if the conversation was going to go that way, but it hasn't. And it feels kind of shoehorned at this point.
I think Chris has a question about it, though.
Oh, do you?
Oh, no, not really.
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to say that she passes through Edinburgh tomorrow. I think, generally people over in the UK are quite sad about it, although I think it's more, English people are generally more royalist than Scotland is as a country, but I think there's a lot of people in Scotland who are sad about it as well.
Okay. I mean, I have seen quite a bit of sadness online the last couple of days.
Sorry, I find myself in a bubble of my own making, and it has not become more apparent than recently when I found that most of the people I follow are lighting fireworks. I'm like, oh, hey,
Oh, wow.
this is a whole thing that I've included myself in. I better
That's because you follow the people that I follow.
Chris, thank you so much for calling in. What time is it over there?
It is 18:36, so it's like, just after 6:30 at night.
Oh,
Okay.
Well, thank you for staying on.
Thank you for staying on the line.
Yeah,
we
thank
appreciate
you.
talking to you. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Oh, shit. I cut it too early.
That's okay.
That was nice.
That was nice. And I don't know. I feel a little scattered today, so apologies if I'm not at my incisivist. Most incisive. But I do think that it's useful to think not only about what is going to help the other person get out of this space, what is going to help deconvert or deconstruct or crumble this bad idea for the other person, and also like, how am I moving through the world? And am I doing it in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable? Because otherwise, I'm going to fucking quit after a couple of years.
Totally understood. And yeah, that's your journey. Mm-hmm. That's your journey.
Oh, that's so condescending. Oh my gosh.
I don't mean it that way.
I know you don't, but like, guys, never tell somebody, that's your journey.
I'm sorry. Let me finish what I was going to say.
Yes.
I want to support it and make it as happy as possible.
I love you so much, and I know that's what you meant.
I'm sorry.
It's just very funny.
I see. This is yeah. Appreciate it. Okay, we got one person left. Well, I'm sorry. We've got like 5 callers, but we probably only have time for one more.
Who would you like to talk to? We do have a couple repeat callers. We have a couple people who are new. It looks like. You want to talk to Rick?
I would. I feel like it's kind of on brand with where we're at.
Yeah, perfect.
We also have an anti-natalist, but I feel like there won't be a lot of pushback.
At this point, anti-natalism is a fascinating topic for me, but I think it's kind of played out at this point.
We should give it some room to breathe.
Yeah. So thank you for calling in. If you want to call in about something else next week, absolutely, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, but
in the meantime, Rick in Washington wants to know what the threshold is for religious extremism, and is it moral to try and intervene in extremist beliefs? That's really interesting. Rick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you think is the threshold for religious extremism?
You know, that's a really good question. I've been trying to think about that the whole time I was on hold, and I guess I'm not really sure. I know things that are extreme. I agree with a lot of what the previous caller said. I think that believing in flat Earth is pretty extreme. I don't know if I would consider that a religious extremist. I guess we'd have to define the term, but I guess I'm kind of wondering, you know, what is the least kind of extreme thing that would consider to think of someone as an extremist?
Does
that make sense?
Yeah. And this is such a tricky subject for me because I know that I'm going to be out of way off in the outfield here on this one. Like, I have my opinion, but it's not really helpful at this point, I don't think. Because what I would say is we are kind of fucked when it comes to this, because extremism, the echoes of it, the values and aesthetics of it are so deeply baked in to otherwise very mundane and harmless things that it becomes really tricky to identify what is based in extremism and what isn't. Like, we have concepts of, like, for example, this is going to sound weird to some of you, I'm sure. We've had this conversation before. When I dye my hair blonde, I get more compliments. People are nicer to me. People it is just generally a nicer existence for me as a blonde person than as somebody with brown hair. And that is based in extremism, a very specific white supremacist aesthetic that we have adopted as normal. People who are fairer, people who have lighter hair, lighter skin, lighter eyes, are prettier, or are nicer or better people or something. Like there's this thing that's baked in so deeply that it really feels weird and uncomfortable to even like speak on it. But so for me, I don't think it's possible to get out of extremism without deeply deconstructing everything about everything and rebuilding it in a more diverse and safe space. Which is, again, like why I said, like, unhelpful for the context of this conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to advocate for the one step at a time approach.
Yeah, go for it. I know you have a different approach.
Just put one foot in front of the other. We're going to have to watch that movie now.
Not for a couple months. That doesn't come out till Christmas.
Fine. Okay, so Rick, there are a couple of kind of arenas for this. Number one, in the public arena, I think that if you are wanting tax dollars, right, public monies to go into proselytization, that is an unacceptable threshold where extremism is something that I'm going to push back fervently with. In Texas right now, here where we live, schools are being required to put up a sign that says, "In God we trust." There are schools out here that are just having baptisms for the kids in public school, right? Kids coming home and being like, "Hey, I'm a Christian now. I got baptized," parents, right? Like that is fucked. That is deeply fucked. And I'm deeply against that. So anytime that you have that, if you have tax dollars going into religious Christian monuments, things like that, I'm deeply against that. That is the threshold that I think that we can all get behind, because I also would be against a Muslim statue or, any other type of thing that's going on like that is legitimizing one religion over another. When it comes to the personal arena, I think that if someone is only willing to be a family member or a friend, if you take on the tenets of their religion, that is extremism. That is a threshold that I'm not willing to cross. If you have kids and your parents are being like, "Well, I'm only going to be a grandparent if I get to indoctrinate your children into my faith," that is extremism. That is extremism. That is a threshold that I am not willing to cross. That is a threshold that I would fight for, right? You have the right to raise your children in an environment that doesn't have that there. If you have a coworker who thinks that they have the right to harass you or shame you or make your lack of belief something that is a joke at the workplace, right? Or a boss, worse off, right? Who does that? Who makes you feel like you can't say, "Oh, I'm not a believer," Instead, when they come through and they go, "Oh, well, I'm raising money for the church," and they're your boss, there are a lot of people who feel like, "Oh my gosh, no, I have to donate money to this church. Otherwise, they're going to see and out me as a non-believer." That's fucked. That is a threshold. That is very clearly a line that I think that we should not be going past, right? The idea that the freedom from religion is a level ground where all other faiths, all conflicting ideas and viewpoints can be equalized, where you can it sounded like you wanted to say something.
I'm just,
or it looks like
I want to throw a wrench in this just pedantically.
What's up? Am I using threshold wrong?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
My question though is, in the last call, we advocated for mocking people for stupid beliefs. And now you're saying that making fun of somebody for being a non-believer is extremism. So where are you drawing that line between, I get to mock people for things I disagree with, but you don't get to mock me or else it's extremism?
Sure. So the boss thing, I think, is a power dynamic
Boss
issue.
thing, power dynamic for sure.
So, we can put that on the shelf. If somebody is, I think the workplace is just not a place for that.
So don't mock flat earthers at your workplace either.
No, not really.
Okay, cool. That was my only question.
Yeah, when it comes to work,
Proceed.
If you're just going, that's something for HR to deal with. I honestly don't think the workplace is a place to mock people.
Okay.
Generally.
Cool. I agree with you. I just wanted to know what the common denominator
where
was
the line,
there. Yeah. Cool.
Rick, so we went over public. We went over personal relationships. When it comes to...
May I interject?
Hit me. What do you got?
So I definitely agree with you as far as all of those examples. I think those are, I don't want to say obvious, but I guess what I'm getting at is I definitely mean for more personal.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
like let's say a loved one. You are very close to a couple, and one of them wants to teach the child something religious.
Okay.
You know, at what teaching does that become extreme? You know, is teaching the child that Jonah literally lived inside of a fish for 3 days, is that extreme? And if it is, do you say something to one of them?
Got it.
You know, I'm talking about people you're very close to, you know. And if that's not extreme, at what point does it become extreme? It doesn't necessarily have to be about a child, but I feel like that was just the example I thought of.
No, that's a really helpful clarification. I think we both missed that initial component. So what I would say is, as soon as it becomes a situation where they are actively excluding others in whatever form, that is a big red flag for me. So if it's you can't be with that person, or you can't talk to this person, or you can't watch that for reasons other than like it's too violent, you're 5, or, you know, like any situation where information is being removed is for me the biggest red flag that things are moving towards extremism. If somebody wants to teach their kid something, like, okay, as somebody who is neither the parent nor the child, that kind of is not something we can do anything about. If that person then starts removing that child from things, or isolating them, or, you know, not allowing them to engage with other information, that becomes an issue where other people who care about that child may want to step in.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is, you know, let's say it's someone you spend a lot of time with, you know, a sibling even, whether or not you have siblings, you know, and at what point do you start pushing back when the child starts talking to you about flat Earth? Or, you know, if they start asking you questions about 6,000-year-old Earth, do you just avoid the questions entirely?
No.
I think I'm trying to, from a moral perspective, you know, I don't think that I should interfere in other people's parenting or lives in general unless, you know, I'm preventing harm or preventing them from harming others, etc.
Right.
But, you know, how do you handle that?
If someone's going to be mad at you for being honest about talking about yourself, if they wanted to talk to you about flat Earth and you said, I actually don't believe that the Earth is flat, then I think that's fine. But personally, I think that what I would wrap this entire conversation in is, if you have the opportunity to, and I know it is a privilege, but if you have the opportunity to talk to a therapist about it, the delicate trappings of interpersonal relationships is one that is so varied that any answer that I could give is entirely based on the interpersonal relationships that I have with people that I know. And for some people, maybe tiny changes that is a nothing burger for everybody else could be a really big deal for that group because of their unique circumstances.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that instead of necessarily going, well, this is extremism and that isn't extremism when it comes to those personal relationships, working on where your lines are. You don't need us to legitimize those for you, because they are where your lines are. And it's totally okay to be like, hey, you know what? I have a much higher or lower tolerance for this bullshit, and we are not going to delegitimize that. You know, wherever you need to be to have comfortable, healthy, positive relationships in your life, I feel like that's something that you kind of got to work out. And I'm not just talking to you on this one, Rick. I'm talking to everybody who's watching, because there are some people who think that they need to fit the atheist mold, otherwise they're going to be out of the club. You know, which is a viewpoint that a lot of us brought with us from religious, you know, upbringings. But that's just not the case. You know, find what you need, and I advocate for you to do that, and I would support you in doing that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling in, Rick. This was a really good conversation, I think. And we wish you luck, or this hypothetical third party who might need help.
I have other questions regarding anti-natalism and kind of related to this, but I will certainly call back, and I really appreciate taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. Please do call back.
Definitely. And maybe let's give anti-natalism a little time to breathe before we jump back into it.
Will do.
All right. Take care, Rick.
Bye.
Thanks.
Oh, that's funny. We had somebody call in like 7 minutes ago as we were like letting all the callers
Oh my goodness,
go.
in Canada.
Yeah.
Loneliness and being an atheist and black in another country. Atheism is seen as a thing for white people.
Please do call back next week.
Call early because
Yeah.
we would want to spend some real time talking to you.
Oh my goodness.
Damn, that's a good, yeah.
Okay, so we had some like spicy calls this week. I feel like they were all like super, like I was not mentally prepared to deal with the level of intensity that these calls.
I think you did really good. I had fun with it, and I love that we can disagree. I think I have the most fun when I deeply disagree with you.
Yeah.
That is when everything gets so exciting because it's like, oh my gosh, okay, I want to know how does this, how do we get, like, it's so much fun.
It is quite fun.
I wish we could normalize that because a lot of people think, oh wow, there's argument and all, things are bad. No.
There were people on the last week's episode being like, oh, they're breaking up.
No, we
brother.
cheered each other on. We love when we have disagreements like that because those are the most beautiful opportunities for personal growth.
It definitely wasn't not a turn on that resulted in fun times afterwards. Just saying. All right, let's do some. Are you okay over there?
Yep.
Okay, super chats.
Okay.
And then we'll close out.
All right.
You want to go first?
Sure. Kendall Brass sent $10. Thank you, Kendall. Says, my internet was out but came back on just in time for my Sunday shows. So that means the gods are promoting skepticism now, right?
Sure.
I mean, that works for me. Sure.
Absolutely. Zhang, thank you so much. Sent $5 and says, after I die, people can talk all the shit they want about me. I'm no longer around to care.
Yep.
Yeah, that's generally how that goes.
RG sent their weekly banana.
Thank you, RG. Teresa H sent $5 and a little high five emoji. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah. Marcel De Jong sent €2 and says, what a cute kitty. Damn, yeah, we had a cute kitty.
Yeah.
She's sleeping in her bed right now.
She got tuckered out. And then King Nick 1994 sent €10 and said, that kitty is weapons grade cute. Great show as usual. You guys are great.
Aw,
Thank you.
So just so you know, these super chats go to supporting the show. If we like what we do, and
If we like what we do.
If you like what we do and you want to support us, there are ways that you can. Hey, like this, right? Hit the like button. Our like ratio right now is awful compared to all of the people watching. Come on, smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Ring the notification bell. Share this out. If you're listening to this as a podcast, please, please, please take the time to leave a positive review. That helps get us out there. If you like the show, but you're really freaking sick of the ads, guess what? We have ad-free versions. Go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration to get an ad-free version of the podcast and this live stream. We upload that usually same day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And real fast, Dante, thank you for reminding me. We do have a Versus episode this Tuesday.
I'm just up on my meds.
It'll be good. You got a couple days of...
I think I'm filming that day too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
Okay.
All right, we're going to do it. We think. If we can't, it's Eric's fault. But we would love to see you there. And thank you so much for joining us this week. Have a safe and relaxing weekend. And until next time,
we're glad we had this talk.